Hi, and welcome to this health and embodiment call, Unlock Your Genius. This is sponsored by Unlock Your Design and by Purium. We don't necessarily speak about Purium during the calls, but if you want to stay after, or if you want to reach out to me and John after, you can definitely do that. The topic that we're going to speak about today is about emotional health and gut health, including digestion. And in that part, I would also say for those of you that are into human design and maybe a little bit more advanced, it's also a possibility to weave in your PHS, maybe in your environment, because when it comes to gut health and emotional health, of course, it's important both where we are, who we are around, and what it is that we eat, like how our whole digestive system is working. So with that, I would say too, I have John with me today, and we have spoken a little bit behind the scenes about this already. And we had a few topics that we were choosing from for today. And this one, I really like it because it had me really think back into periods of time of my life where I had very low life quality because of not being able to feel okay in the world. And sometimes I didn't know what was the egg and what was the, how do you say, the chicken, because I didn't know if my emotional not feeling well created my digestive not feeling well, or if my digestive issue created me not feeling well emotionally and kind of being more isolated and not going out in the world in the same way. So these are all topics for this more informal conversation today. I would like to set the guidelines that whenever we speak, a few minutes per person, and then if you have several things you want to say, speak, and then allow somebody else to come in and then come back and speak about another topic. It's really about the dialogue more than like monologues in here. And with that, I would like to give it over to you, John, and kind of from your perspective with this, what you want to start bringing up on this topic of emotional health and digestive health or gut health.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things that always comes to mind on this topic is how we often can be connected to our emotional health as an aspect of our identity. We feel that our emotional health is specifically determining who we are in the world and how we can experience it. And the thing that always strikes me when we connect this to deeper levels of physical health is how dependent upon community our emotional health actually is. And one of the gene keys we were talking about recently, Bella, made me think about this sort of relationship between the micro world and the macro world and how those things are connected. And what we often don't realize is that who we are as a physical being is part of a community, a larger community of beings. And that can be the larger community of human beings, or it can be the micro community of miniature beings that are in our guts that deeply contribute to how we experience our emotional well-being. So, in my experience, all of that, it relates specifically to overall mood experiences of feeling good and mood experiences of kind of not feeling so great, and looking at how that connects to that micro community that's happening inside my body, on my skin, all around me in terms of all of those things. So that's kind of the topic that I see, a perspective on the topic that I see that we could talk about, and really stepping back to see, wow, how much of my emotional health is actually being determined by my thoughts and my overall capability of reacting to my environment, and how much of it is being determined by an internal community that I may not be paying that much attention to.
Would you maybe give an example for you how that dialogue or how that has happened in you and in your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking about diet, when I would move into periods of something that would allow my body to feel more energy, more consistency, more sort of something that I would call healthier, I would tend to find a lift in my mood overall. And until recently, just this year, there was always this sort of like pervasive field of depressive experience that was kind of around me. And I kind of tend more towards those depressive types of engaging with the lower frequency that may be coming through my genes, or however we look at that. And when I really got my gut health cleaned up, and the way that was functioning for me, it was almost like an instant switch for feeling happiness. And, we could connect that to serotonin, the chemical that is primarily produced by the digestive tract. And it really makes such a huge difference in terms of feeling my overall emotional health. I feel so much healthier, emotionally speaking, when I feel happy every day. And that's one of the consequences that I've experienced of really changing the well-being that I experience in my gut.
Yeah, I feel it's interesting too, the fact that the sun is in 5 right now and the earth is in 35, which is the amino acid tryptophan. And that's very important when it comes to serotonin, and how Richard speaks about the 35 and your adventure coming back to the heart, and how that is impacting your hormonal balance and your brain chemistry and all that. So we are kind of aligned with where we are in the transits as well. So let's see, with these little things that we've shared so far, is anything like poking you to speak? Does anyone want to share something, ask something, add something? Yeah.
Hi. Hi, I'm Elena, and I do have a question. I'm trying, since months, I'm trying to figure something out, and I cannot do it by myself. I think I cannot see the one tree in front of a million. So I have in my design sun the 29.6, and in my design earth 36. And my husband has the opposite. So my design sun is 29.6, and I'm sorry. I wrapped it up. So my design earth is the 29.6, and his sun is the 29.6. So the direct opposite. And my design sun is the 36, and so my radiance is the 36. Maybe this is easier. My radiance is the 36, and his evolution is the 36. So I'm trying to figure out, I think almost the whole year, why we are, so I think we are totally, we are similar, but also we are just fighting for all these little things. And I think this has a lot to do with the signs that are both the same and also same in the line, but in opposite directions. So maybe you have an answer for me.
I would say to not in order for us to, in a way, not get lost in the numbers, I would say that you and your husband, in one way, it's a blessing. Because if you think about all the possible activation sequences that are out there and how different people can be, and like how I often speak about the archetypes, depending on circuitry, they care about completely different things. Like this gate care about this gate cares about that actually you care about similar things. I feel that we will go back to Richard Rudd's work here and say, the more you can work on the breakthrough, which is your conscious side and your unconscious side being friends with each other, dancing together, the more you can work on that core stability where you include your whole activation sequence, both you and him, the more you're actually going to be in equilibrium, both sides of you. And there is not one side, maybe often the mind, that is taking over, but it could also be the unconscious that isn't in balance, it's taking over. So somehow, like Richard Rudd always says, working on yourself and make sure that you're embodying the whole activation sequence, not just being stuck, for example, in that challenge between the sign, or sorry, the conscious sun and the conscious earth, evolution and sun. And I think that with that, because John has the 29 and the 30, and maybe also the fact that 30 is a very strong key that has strong desires, but also it's an emotional key. And then sometimes it also feels like it gets really serious about things. It's kind of like we're saying, I can't figure this out. And like I've been, like I have the 46, which is also seriousness. I know that the 30 has a similar tendency. So I wonder, John, I mean, this being your evolution. So I feel like in the 6th line, I feel like you have something to add here with that kind of.
Yeah. So 29 and 30 as a grouping together can present a particular challenge in this area of relationship, because it gets so deep into our kind of universal experiences of desire, of fulfillment, of commitment, of motivation. I mean, these are the themes of relationship in it when we're talking about a sort of a relationship between a man and a woman who are engaged in marriage or some type of romantic form of relating. And because the 29 completes a channel with the 46, the seriousness can be a major like roadblock for me in terms of finding my way with that fire element of desire moving into lightness. Lightness is kind of a challenging concept, and because we can't really get there with our heads. And when we get into commitment with seriousness, it jacks up our evolution sphere of 30. When I'm talking about we, I mean you and me. that 30th sphere of moving into lightness can be a challenge. So all of these, for myself personally, I have a similar geometry in the romantic relationship that I'm involved in that has the 34-20 as the kind of key to that mirroring. So a little bit different.
My husband has the same. This is really, you're kidding me.
No.
Yeah. His life's work is 29, and the evolution is 30, and then 2034 is radiance.
Yeah,
and
that's me.
Hello.
Yeah. So the interesting part about that particular one is the 34-20 is very unconscious in terms of how it gets expressed, because it's in the body area. So I mean, to really like sort of universalize what I want to share about this in some way, it's that in relating, when we relate with our emotions, for everyone, it's extraordinarily important that we take somewhat of that experience of lightness, that gift of lightness, where we're not overly serious that, oh my God, I'm in this negative emotion and this is the end of everything. We can go down that rabbit hole where this is the most important experience and it becomes blown out of proportion, like a fire that just got all the fuel that it wants and it just kind of blows up. That energy is very prone to that. And so as light as we can be about the negative experiences that we're having, the more we can move through those emotions with kind of an easeful way of being. And so it's kind of important to, I think, take ourselves with a little bit of a grain of salt and say, like, okay, here's my drama queen coming out, and just kind of realize that that's a part of what's happening when we get super emotional, particularly in relationships. And hopefully that's something that everybody can relate to on some level, of seeing like, oh yeah, I got super emotional in this state and I couldn't get out of it. And here we are now with this sort of, trying to figure out how it is. That's kind of where I've been with that kind of energy.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation, or because I am for now, I'm living this. So when I'm light or thinking, okay, it can be lighter than usual, he expressed it in the total other way. So he has great desires, and everything is heavy. And so if I'm explaining it easy, when he's the drama queen, I'm not. When I'm a drama queen, he's not. And this is what I'm expressing almost the whole year. I mean, I expressed it surely before, but now I understand it with the Jikis a little better. So, but I cannot find the way out. So if I'm light, he's not. And when I tell him, okay, hey, you have to be light because this is your evolution, you have to be light. Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. If somebody ever tell you what to do, you will not do it. And especially if it's somebody that's very, very close. Yeah.
I think what's important to focus on in this particular dynamic is that what is in one person's body is being expressed in the other person's personality. And in that dynamic, we can really tune, both people involved can really tune into their bodies to recognize what's happening through the other to some extent. Obviously, one side of that, that's gonna be kind of one-sided in your relating, meaning that 29-30 dynamic is going to have in one person's body and then in the other person's personality, and then it won't flip exactly because you're not quite lined up that exactly of a mirror. But to tune into how the body responds to the other's personality, this is something that can really make emotional challenges in partnerships really move to another level, is understanding how does my body respond to another person's personality, and then how does my personality respond to the other person's body. And when you really like clue into what's happening there in that dynamic, you're getting into that space. Bella was just bringing up, Bella and Ashley were actually talking about the Eden loop, which is a way in which we can kind of get trapped in a never-ending loop of sort of low frequency interaction. When we start to really pay attention to these dynamics of body and personality, and then how that switches in the other, we can begin to kind of understand a little bit better what's happening between us. When, for instance, well, I would say when my wife is in this, I'm not married, but if I were in your shoes. When my wife is in a certain way of expressing herself, my body feels full of desire, or my body is unfulfilled with my desires. And recognizing that as kind of a pattern that we need to move beyond, rather than making it the responsibility of my wife to fulfill the unfulfilled patterns. When I feel unfulfilled patterns in my body, I need to bring some lightness and some play to my body so that I can kind of detach from that. Same thing with the personality, for instance. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a direction to focus in, because I think that dynamic is one of the key ones in relating that we can get lost in without our awareness being present with it.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean. I will try it out, just because it's in my body. I will try it out, just to breathe in and wait a second or two. Just to reflect it. And is it maybe also a solution to just work on my SQ, or because this is, at the end, is this the breakthrough where I have to start to come through the activation sequence?
I'm going to sort of defer to Bella on the SQ point, but I think what's important to understand is that oftentimes in relating, one person's personality triggers the other person's body, which causes that person's body's personality to respond in a defensive way. That triggers the first person's body, okay? Yeah. So once you begin to notice this dynamic occurring, you can recognize what's happening in your body and realize that your personality doesn't necessarily need to defend your body from the experience it's having. This is a pattern that is being replayed from the earlier spheres of your life. So yes, maybe uncovering the SQ is going to shift this for you. Maybe it won't. The pattern in a relationship is usually based on a habit of behaving in particular ways, and that habit is really the key that you want to get to of shifting. Does that sort of make a little bit more sense?
That makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, John. And definitely when we look at personality and design, we could simply say it's the mind and the body. So that would be when we look at life's work and radiance, and on the other side we have life's work and evolution and radiance and purpose. When we speak about the Eden loop, we are actually speaking about conscious Venus and Mars. So that's actually more of the layers of the mind and the emotions. So what I would say, instead of going into all the details about this, it's definitely about wholeness, and the wholeness that we find is usually always first in ourselves. So to look at the triggers and actually work with the triggers as, oh, thank you, I get to look at this, and not so much actually trying to even have our partner do anything, especially when you have the 20 and the 34. That's individual integration channels, and it's death for outside influence. The more you tell it to do something, the more it's going to be busy, unavailable, doing something else. So it's definitely taking it back to yourself, to, like you say, your SQ, your activation sequence, feeling that combination of you that is the mind and the body and the emotions and the spirit and the wholeness of you. And the more you can come home in that wholeness, the more it's not really going to matter. Either your partner is not going to stand you anymore because you're too much in wholeness, or he'll come into wholeness with you. But definitely a bit of patience. We have the 30, which is very emotional gate. And with all emotional gates, whether we have emotional authority or not, it's definitely that pause, like I said, breathe until you have a little bit more calm before you react or do anything with your body or your expression or anything. So thank you, Jelena. I would also invite in, if you have things that are connected for other people that speak, they're connected also to your digestion, to your metabolism, through how you absorb things in the world. That's also welcome. Jennifer, is your question, yeah, let's take you and see if we can also include a bit of that health aspect to the emotional aspect.
Yes, I can do all of that, what you have just asked. So for myself, relating food to gut health, for myself, it's about all nutrition, not just what I put in my mouth. And I have a tendency to binge, and that can be binge watch, binge eat, and binge on information. And I've also learned that for me, that has been okay. Like there's the times where binging is healthy, and I'm finally learning, thank all of it, that where it goes from healthy binging to unhealthy binging, instead and calling it receiving and then gathering and then putting in, and then what am I going to do with it? So I used to binge, and I'm going to use, it doesn't matter if it's food, information, or whatever else I said. I would even say experiences that are beyond food and beyond information. I would use that as an escape to feel my emotions. Now that could relate to the fact that, well, it does relate to the fact that I'm a manifesting generator with a sacral. So and I have the 3420. Everything is instant. Everything is now. And I had to turn it off. I learned to turn it off, and turning it off was not healthy. So turning it back on for it to be healthy for myself, that's been my, I'm going to go my deconditioning, like to use these kind of words. That's, if you want to talk about, so where this is going back to the gut, I wanted to numb my gut because I didn't want to feel, because I'm a feeler. And now I'm learning to use that ability, like when I'm in alignment, that gift of being able to feel is truly my gift. And just learning to love it and forgiving the experiences that I was numb with. And so now I'm in the now, and there you go.
I have immediate feelings, Jennifer. That 3420 is just like screaming.
Well, I have it both in my conscious and subconscious. So I experience it with both my body. Well, just with this discussion, it's like, oh, I do that with both my body and mind at the same time, but potentially with a different filter. And I enjoy the little, I don't know if you remember The Price is Right, but the plong or ping pong, how it goes down. I enjoy that on how, okay, this is how I receive this information, and this is how I receive information. And sometimes they play, and then ta-da. So that part of that is the digesting of it and enjoying, giving space to the digestion. My body thrives when I purposefully fast, but it has to be purposefully. Like with that, intentionally fasting.
Yeah. That's really insightful. And the thing the thing that was like coming from, because obviously the 3420 is present, it's in my unconscious, and it's one of the channels that has that essential survival instinct about it. That's why it's so present in the now. So itself, and it's present with the current environment. And that drive to survive, no matter what is experienced, when you were talking about that feeling of wanting to numb your gut, I recently was kind of reminded of this access to this kind of existential terror that can happen, that I believe comes through some of this energy, and the desire to not feel that feeling because it's so uncomfortable to experience, and the need, because I experienced this too, Jennifer, is this need to numb the feeling down to a level where I can actually process it, because the emotion comes on with such a great intensity, too much for me to process in a way that I would, or digest in a way that I would call appropriate for normal social interaction. It's like the feeling comes on with the intensity, and I just want to go, like kind of like Grover on steroids when Grover has like had enough. And if you do that in the middle of a social interaction, like, it's not good. I mean, it's going to get weird really fast. And so we sort of like are like, oh, what do I do with this emotion? There's too much and I can't express the thing that wants to be expressed. It's like that Black Panther archetype. It's suddenly in a position that it's been cornered and it doesn't see the way out. And it really wants to just go, and respond to this. But that isn't really how we can do things. So for me, the way to process that much energy is like, okay, kind of like the Plinko thing. It's like, okay, it's going to go through these little places a little bit at a time. I'll do all these things to numb my experience, whether it's binge watching a particular show, putting stuff into my mouth that will kind of like has some sort of a soothing impact on my overall system, like a soothing taste or something, and then it's like through that process, I kind of like sort of feel my way through that feeling, but it never reaches that level of aliveness. And I feel like you probably relate to what I'm describing on some way, just because you were laughing while I was doing it.
Yes. And then I also have like the 1648, and then I have a lot of, so relating this back to digestion, I've learned I need small amounts of people unless I'm ready, unless I prepared myself to be around a whole bunch of people in my own personal interaction. If I go to the mall or to the airport, I'm fine because I'm just doing myself. Like the rest of the people don't matter. Well, they matter but they're not part. I'm not engaging them with my experience. But when I'm in this group dynamic where part of it is to collaborate, I have to be I choose the people who I would like to collaborate because I'm literally digesting them. Yeah. So and then I enjoy, I don't know if this is part of digestion. Maybe I now have a question with is verbalizing things part of digestion in the way that with all the preface of all the other stuff that I said before, and or writing journals and or creating things, is that a form of digestion? And it's in a serious tone, so it's actually a serious question. And I shall mute.
Yeah, what that last thing brings up for me is the discernment between what is a crutch / distraction and what is helping with true digestion. Because some of the things that we use can be more of a distraction, or maybe even like we don't have enough acid to digest our food, and then we take tablets of that, and then in the long run it's not really going to help because our body is going to become more sluggish. Someone was writing about sluggishness in the chat. So really discerning when you go to that behavior, whether it's journaling or verbalizing. Again, are you running away from what really matters, or is it actually a process where it's helping you with the very thing that's there? You know, is it helping you to feel, or is it again helping you to not feel? So I feel like only you can know that and answer that for yourself. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. In order to hear more voices, I think we'll go back to you, John, and maybe weave later, but I would like to bring in Nicole, and I would love to bring in more people. I see there's a question in the chat as well. So let's go to Nicole, then to the chat, and then I'd love to bring in a few more voices.
Good morning, everyone. Bringing in the heat for this chat, that's for sure. The 34 seems present for me with this topic, because everyone's mentioning the 34, and once again I forget I have the 34. So me and that panther, it's like my cat's wandering somewhere, I don't know. So thank you, Jen, because that also helps as well. It's interesting with regard to digestion, because I come from a spot where my chart has the 59, 6, 39, 55, and the 27, 50, and the 214. So to me, that's a lot of emotion. And obviously I'm a emotional authority generator. So with the youthful side of myself, John, you made me laugh with the whole, the social appropriateness of your bursting out. I think as a small child, I did do that. And that got completely crushed by my parents, because it was completely either inappropriate, even as a 4-year-old or whatever age I was, but also I've discovered that my mother has the 39-55 and she doesn't access that side of herself either. So growing up in a place where that was absolutely tamped on, it was go to your room or things like that. And I think decades of that have created a situation in my body where I have massive digestive problems. Sort of the medical establishment are like, we don't know. The amount of tests I have lined up for exactly this issue is quite intriguing to see what their explanations are for why things might be awry. I've got my own theories, but I feel that with regard to digestion, like Jen was saying, we absorb everything, every experience with our eyes open, our ears going, as well as what goes into our mouth, because food is actually the first thing you do is you smell your food, then you taste your food. If you're cooking it, you hear the cooking, you make sure something is cooking by everything around it. So it's a full body experience before it even gets down to the actual physical gut for that biome, which is now finally being caught up by science to go, hey, look, you have a whole other colony living in you that needs to be balanced and needs to coexist. And for me, I keep coming back to this Black Panther and the 10, I have the 34-10, with the 10 being my evolution. And Bella, I forget, I think it's Neptune. Is that the second last planet on the list in your chart? My Panther is in Neptune in my body. So maybe that's why it's perpetually hidden, and it's a one line. So I'm wondering if that's where in my gut, literal gut, I've got a very dormant Panther going, hello, stop ignoring me. I'm going to start roaring if you're not listening. So yeah, so that for me, that's where I'm gathering what has come from this call, is that the emotionality and the suppression of it. And we need to find a way for our children to be allowed to actually share said emotions in a societal appropriate way, because yes, we are a tribe, and yes, we are a collective, and we're very crowded at the moment on the planet. So being able to go raw in the middle of an airport not probably a good idea at this point in time. So there is that, but there is also that needing to allow the child or the person or the partner or the sibling to be allowed to have that experience of safely and securely knowing they can let go of that emotion. And I think in that, the digestion is allowed to happen as well, because you're digesting that emotion, not putting it away for another day to get to it.
Yeah, I have, that's such a beautiful share, and I have so many thoughts back to Jelena and Jennifer as well in what you're sharing, Nicole, because this aspect of digestion that happens for us in the present, it is completely related to our experience of coming into the body and how we absorbed, as you mentioned, Nicole, we absorb everything. And one of the things that the gene keys in human design systems don't address very much is the way in which the subtle bodies actually manifest through our systems. And when you observe a child who's growing up, you can actually watch the child coming into their SQ, for instance. And that SQ process is extraordinarily devoid of connection to any personality. You can also witness them coming into the beginnings of the establishment of what will be eventually their EQ. And that usually happens around the terrible twos, when the sense of self begins to be separated from the entire environment, where if they've grabbed a toy, they literally believe that toy is their identity. And so if you take it away from them, it's literally painful for the child, because they feel as if an aspect of self has been torn from them. And then as the mental capacity begins to come in, these periods happen much faster than our spheres are fully developed. But it's like inside one sphere, inside another, inside another, inside another. And as we absorb all of these things, we begin to go through a process of relating to the outer environment with the purpose of digesting everything that has occurred. And in our 7-year cycles, that's to digest it through a physical process, to move our physical bodies in ways that can digest what happened in the womb. And then as we come into the EQ, we begin to have feelings that are being digested and processed for all of the things that happened in the womb and in our first 7 years, and so on and so forth. And I believe, in relation to both Jelena and Jennifer, this digestion process happens in the mirroring of our relationships. And I believe this is why so many people are so drawn to the Venus sequence as a method of kind of getting to the bottom of the core of what makes us who we are. Not only because obviously the spheres specifically show us a map of who we are in terms of our experience as a human, but also because it provides for us the map of how we can experience it in relationship to other people. That speaking out loud is a form of digestion, because we can't get the perspective of it within us until it comes out and is reflected by some mirror, a human being, a husband, a wife, a family, that can kind of give us some sort of feedback about what it is that we are expressing. We need that other perspective so that we can understand better what's happening inside of us. And in relationship to that Black Panther, that's like the basic version of that. It's like completely and connected to the 10 of self-obsession, like fully focused inwards in relationship to the environment that it's walking through on its life path. And so I think, in terms of digesting experience, yes, this archetype of that panther, has such a huge role to play of self and environment, self in relationship, self in other. It's the second line to some extent. And what we see when we look through our body system, the very base, the first line is the root. The second line goes into the sacral area, which is the foundation for everything that comes in the third, which is our digestion. So that second line, being able to have that foundation allows us to move into a state of digestion. And once that digestion occurs, then we can move into a state of really bringing what we've received and sharing it with our community. So moving through those lines of who we are, I mean, this is like right at the basis of everything that we have to look at in terms of moving from sort of a victimized experience in a shadow state from the gene key perspective to living into a gift state where we're actually collective as a community. And again, speaking about that digestive community that lives inside our gut, that's where it begins, I believe, in terms of really activating that process in ourselves.
Thank you, John. So I would like to go back. I have a little bit of time left. So let's see. Rebecca said, I'm curious if a wide split contributes to sluggish digestion and how to improve that. And a split in the human design body graph is where you're going to have some centers that are connected through channels and therefore defined, right? And then there are going to be other places in the body graph where you have other centers that are defined by channels, but they are kind of islands with two or more centers together that are defined. And when we speak about a wide split or large split, it is that it would take more than one gate to bridge that split. A small split would be there's only one gate that's necessary in order to bridge everything together. And the feeling where there's a wide split can be, again, wide split can be a little bit more that are two different parts. In one sense, I feel it's easier because when you have a split that only has one gate, you're going to attract people on the outside, partners, business partners, people that have that gate, and maybe they are expressing that gate in a low frequency. It doesn't matter. It's biomechanics. So you could kind of, what Yelena was saying, you could actually attract in people in a very low frequency. I have, for example, a 29 is something that's not in my body graph. So I attract that, or I try to overcommit myself. I try to become that. So when it's a wide split, it's less of an obsession of what's missing, but there can be more of a feeling of two different parts of you. And here I feel like even something like internal family systems, like recognizing there's a part of you, for example, you have the root and the emotional, that's very emotional and that kind of speaks and converses and acts like this. And there's another part of you that is, for example, your head and your ajna that acts in a different way, and like recognizing those different parts and actually start the conversation. So it's going to look different depending on where the split is, but it's recognizing, like whether we speak about the Venus sequence or we speak about anything else, it's the wholeness of you, that everything is there to be included. And I would add to this that you want to always respect your aura type, which is your strategy, you could say, and your authority, like aura type and in your authority, you can't really actually take them apart. So sometimes it's a little bit complicated because you're like, okay, I'm a generator because I have a sacral, but I'm also emotional. So should I look in that part that has the emotional, or should I look in that part that has my sacral? So I would say here, in order to give any really good advice that are personal, we would have to look at the chart and see what's happening. But in general, I would say you do want to look at all the parts of you, and they all want to sit around the table. And you also want to put a little bit extra highlight on what's your aura type. You know, you want to be in strategy with that. Use your energy as that aura type, whether you're a projector, a manifestor, reflector, or a generator, manifesting generator. And then your inner authority, you also want to respect that together with what's there. So Rebecca, I mean, I think that this is more maybe a question for where we can come together and actually look at a chart, or maybe a mini reading, a 20-minute reading, kind of looking at that. So there are definitely ways, but in general, that would be my recommendation. John, is there anything with that you feel like you would like to add when it comes to, I mean, you were speaking about splits actually earlier this week, so I'm sure that you have something here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could say about split definitions, but when it comes to this theme of digestion, I think it's important to understand that when you have split definition, the energy that is reliable for you is going to come from what it appears to feel like, or what it feels like as two separated systems, or in some cases, three separated systems. Yes. And when we look at saying, oh, I'm having an emotional experience, let me use my mind, when the split is where your emotional plexus is not connected to your ajna, for instance, or your throat. When you want to process one system using a separate system, understand that you are not going to be capable of digesting what happened through the alternate system. You have to digest your experience through the system which that experience impacted, which of course is every system, but normally we're going to have some contrast of experience of saying, oh, that hit me in the gut, where, you know, that is the experience that we've had. We need to process, if we've got a split, we don't need to digest by talking about it. We need to digest through whatever our emotional center is connected with. So if it's the sacral that it's connected to, we need to do it through sound. We can go and kind of get super weird about how we're expressing that emotion, get really primitive with it, and start moving our body, because that's what the sacral is all about, is moving the life force through the body. So if we get on the other hand, if we're receiving a bunch of information and we're trying to directly connect it to our experience, if again, that's where the split exists, we're not going to be able to digest our direct experience in relationship to the information that's coming in. We need to look at the information purely neutrally in terms of our experience and go like, does this information agree with itself? And let that be enough to understand it, to let it digest through your mind. So, I mean, we could get into all sorts of examples because all of the splits are different. You can have the heart connected to your emotional center, and then your sacral connected to your throat. You could have your G center connected to your heart, and then, you know, your root connected to your spleen. It's just, there's so many varieties. But to understand that when you have split definitions, you're essentially working with multiple digestion systems that you will need to devise different strategies in order to achieve the digestion that's being asked for. And rather than trying to connect all of your split definitions every time something happens, you're going to want to look at your experiences from each system, different perspective. As you do that, your experience of those different systems is going to create a correlation of understanding that is sort of hard to wrap your brain around. but it will give you access to what it is that you need in relationship to your auric strategy. So those ways, I mean, it's a little bit more complicated to be a split definition type of a person, but you also get the benefit of having really contrasting experiences or perspectives about any particular experience, which gives you a wide swath of data that you can draw on to contribute to the collective as somebody with those definitions split up. Hopefully that is helpful in this area. And for those of us on the call who are single definition, it really, when I've begun to learn about split definition people and how their energy types work, it really makes me appreciate their capacity for holding different perspectives in different forms than just one way, which could be a fixed mental attitude or a fixed emotional attitude or a fixed response attitude. You know, they can really teach you about life in new ways as a single definition person than you have considered before, and it can really enrich your experience.
Yeah, thank you, John. I love everything you said. And as I'm tuning in spontaneously and geometrically and intuitively, I do feel that what you're speaking about is especially valuable for the wide splits. And there is something I feel with the splits that have only one gate, where there is still going to be a little bit of that obsession of feeling whole in ourselves. And something that I have been oriented towards this week was actually the crystal alphabet. And I'm somebody, I've had a lot of crystals. I do have a lot of crystals, but there is almost this thing of like, you know, kind of not fake spirituality, but a little bit of like, yeah, crystals is beautiful. And I never really paid attention to Richard's crystal index. But there was something with this thing about gold coming to me 3 or 4 times in just the past week. And I'm like, what is it with gold? What is it with gold? And I went to Richard's crystal index and I saw that gold is number 14. And 14 is what connects my life's work in the second gene key, is a harmonic gate. And it's also what actually closes my split. So there might be something with this conversation today and where I'm shown that there is also a connectivity. I mean, gold is very connecting, right? In connectivity that actually could help if you have a small split. Look at what are the crystals that actually can create that connection. And then maybe it could change your experience of how things are digested or processed or speaking to each other in you. So that's also an idea. And I think very much that those calls are for that, is to spark things in us. And we go deep. I mean, what John just said was super deep. What I just said is more like a little spark of an idea of what you can try. And that's what those conversations are for. Those dialogues are for. So let's continue to explore on Tuesdays. You're super welcome to come back. And I would say, because we already went an hour, that if you're interested in anything that has to do with emotional health, gut health, Purium, or any supplement support, reach out to me or reach out to John, or even tell us by message next week you would like to stay on and speak with us. That's always a possibility. But I want to thank everybody for today, for your input, your sharings, your questions, so valuable. And yeah, come back again. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, everybody. Really awesome discussion. I loved it.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.